The colony ship moved through the darkness of space like a small island of light in an endless ocean. Inside the vessel, named Harmony's Rest, 340 people slept in their quarters or worked at their stations, dreaming of the new world they would soon call home. The ship had been traveling for 6 months, and New Terra was only 3 weeks away now. Everyone was excited. Everyone was hopeful. Captain Haynes stood on the bridge watching the stars through the viewport. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Korean Space Navy for 20 years before taking this assignment. Leading colonists to a new world seemed like a peaceful way to end his career. He sipped his coffee and checked the navigation displays. Everything looked normal. On the education deck, 15 children sat in a circle while Dr. Minji read them a story. The children had come from Seoul District Station after their old habitat suffered a terrible accident. They had lost their homes, and some had lost their parents. The colony mission had accepted them, giving them a chance for a new beginning. Dr. Minji, the ship's medical officer, had taken special care of them during the journey. She was kind and patient, and the children trusted her. Giwon, a 9-year-old girl with short black hair, listened to the story while keeping one eye on her younger brother. Taeyang was 7 years old and always getting into things he shouldn't. Right now, he was supposed to be sitting still, but his fingers were playing with a small circuit board he had found somewhere. Juan knew he would take it apart before bedtime. Nari, the youngest at 6 years old, hugged her stuffed rabbit and smiled at the story. The rabbit's name was Hops, and Nari carried it everywhere. She had carried it through the habitat accident, through the rescue, through everything. The rabbit was worn and patched, but Nari loved it more than anything. The story ended, and the children clapped. Dr. Minji smiled and told them it was time to get ready for sleep. The children groaned, but started cleaning up their area. They had learned to follow routines on the ship. Routines made them feel safe. That was when the alarms started screaming. Captain Hyan's coffee cup fell from his hand as the bridge erupted in flashing red lights. His first officer shouted something about a ship approaching fast. Too fast. The sensors showed a vessel twice their size dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. Evasive action. Hayan ordered, but he knew it was too late. The colony ship was designed for comfort, not speed. They couldn't outrun whatever was coming. The attacking ship was ugly and brutal-looking, covered in dark metal plates and weapon ports. It belonged to the Vrixathi, a species known throughout the galaxy for slave trading and cruelty. They were predators who saw other species as resources to be harvested and sold. The Vrixathi ship fired, not to destroy, but to disable. Electromagnetic pulses washed over the Harmony's Rest, shutting down engines and weapons. Emergency power kicked in, but the colony ship was helpless now. Drifting in space, Captain Hand slammed his fist on the console. Send a distress call. All frequencies. His communications officer's hands flew over her controls. Sending now, sir. But the nearest patrol is days away. Send it anyway, Hyun said. His voice was hard. Someone needs to know what happened here. On the education deck, Dr. Mingi heard the alarms and immediately moved toward the children. Everyone stay calm, she said, though her own heart was racing. We need to go to the emergency shelter. But before the children could move, something slammed into the side of the ship. The deck shook violently. Lights flickered. Nari screamed and clutched her rabbit tighter. Go now. Dr. Mingi shouted, herding the children toward the door, but the door wouldn't open. The electromagnetic pulse had locked it. Gyuan grabbed Taeyang's hand. Stay close to me, she told him. Taeyang nodded, his eyes wide with fear. Another impact. This one was different. Louder. Closer. Something was cutting through the hole. The Vrixathi boarding team breached through the education deck's outer wall. They wore armored suits and carried weapons that crackled with blue energy. Their faces were hidden behind helmets. But their intentions were clear. Dr. Mingi pushed herself between the aliens and the children. No, she screamed. Leave them alone. The lead Vrixathi, Commander Thexrel, stepped forward. He was tall and moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. He looked at Dr. Minji, then at the children behind her. His scanners had been right. Young humans. Perfect specimens for the genetic experiments his clients wanted. Take them, Thexreal ordered in his clicking, hissing language. Dr. Minji fought. She hit and kicked and screamed, but a Vrixathi soldier struck her with the butt of his weapon. She fell to the floor, blood running from her head. The children screamed. Giwan tried to run, pulling Taiyang with her, but there was nowhere to go. The Vrixathi were fast and efficient. They had done this before 2 other species, other children, one by one. The aliens grabbed the children and forced them into strange pods. The pods were made of transparent material, and inside each one was a mist that made the children sleepy. Giwan fought the hardest, scratching and biting, but they overpowered her. As the mist filled her pod, she saw Taeyang crying in the pod next to her. She saw Nari clutching her rabbit as the sleep took her. "No," Guan whispered as her eyes closed. "Please no." Captain Hyun ran through the corridors toward the education deck, but he was too late. By the time he arrived with his security team, the Vrixathi were already retreating to their ship with their cargo. The pods containing the children were being loaded through the breach in the hull. Hyun raised his weapon and fired. But his shots bounced off the Vrixathi armor. One of the aliens turned and fired back. The shot missed Hyun by inches and burned a hole in the wall behind him. Then they were gone. The Vrixathi sealed the breach behind them with quick foam and detached from the colony ship. Their vessel's engines flared bright, and within seconds, it jumped away into faster-than-light travel. Captain Hyun fell to his knees. Around him, his security team stood in shocked silence. Dr. Minji was being helped up by one of the crew members, blood still streaming down her face. She looked at the empty deck where the children had been moments before and started crying. "Sir," the communications officer's voice came through Han's radio. "The distress call is away. It's on all frequencies, including the old military emergency channel." Hyun stood up slowly. His hands were shaking. In his entire career, through battles and emergencies and disasters, he had never felt like this. Never felt this kind of cold rage building in his chest. "Send another message," he said quietly. "Priority Alpha. Military encryption. Tell them the Vrixothi took our children. 15 of them. Tell them we need help. Tell them." His voice broke. "Tell them they were just children." The communications officer sent the message. It traveled through space at the speed of light, jumping through relay stations and communication buoys. It reached listening posts and patrol ships. It reached military installations and command centers, and somewhere, in a command station orbiting Mars, an admiral named Dae-yoon received the message. He read it twice. Then he stood up from his desk and looked out at the fleet of warships floating in dock. Ships that hadn't been used for real combat in over 100 years. "Not again," Admiral Dae-yoon whispered, remembering his own daughter lost to pirates years ago. "Never again." He hit the emergency alert on his desk. Throughout the Mars station, alarms began to sound. Crews ran to their ships. Weapons systems came online. The fleet that the galaxy thought had gone soft, but other species believed would never fight again, began to wake up. The Vrixothi had made a mistake. They had studied human diplomatic records and trade agreements. They had seen humanity's preference for peace and negotiation. They thought humans were weak. They had never asked the important question: what happens when you take a human child? They were about to find out. Admiral Dae-yoon stood in the command center on Mars, staring at the message displayed on the screen in front of him. His fingers gripped the edge of the console so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Around him, officers waited in tense silence. They all knew what that message meant. They all knew what was about to happen. "Confirm the source," Dae-hyun said. His voice steady, despite the anger building inside him. Commander Soman stepped forward. She was young for her rank, only 35, but she had earned her position through years of special operations work. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her dark eyes showed no emotion. "Confirmed, sir." The message came from the colony ship Harmony's Rest. Captain Hyun is a decorated officer. His credentials check out. The message is genuine. Dae-yoon nodded slowly. He had known it was real the moment he read it. No one would fake a message like that. No one would lie about children being taken. He looked around the command center at the faces watching him. Some were young officers who had never seen real combat. Others were veterans like himself, who remembered the old days when humanity had to fight for every inch of space it claimed. How many ships can we deploy immediately? He asked. Send the 47 now, Dayon ordered, and get those other 100 ready. I want every available ship moving toward Verksothi space within the day. The officer hesitated. Sir, the Galactic Council will object. There are treaties about military movements near Verksothi territory. They'll say we're violating. I don't care what they say, Dayon interrupted. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the command center heard the steel in it. Those aliens took 15 human children. 15. Do you understand what that means? It means we're not asking permission. We're not negotiating. We're going to get our children back, and if the Verksothi stand in our way, we'll go through them. The command center erupted into action. Officers shouted orders. Computer systems lit up with tactical displays. Throughout the Mars orbital station, warships that had been in standby mode suddenly came to life. Engines warmed up. Weapon systems activated. Crews that had been running drills and simulations for years suddenly faced the real thing. Commander Salmon approached Dayon. Sir, I request permission to lead the extraction team personally. Dayon looked at her. He knew why she was volunteering. Salmon had built her reputation on impossible rescue missions. She had saved diplomats from pirate bases, extracted scientists from hostile planets, and once pulled an entire research team out of a collapsing orbital station with minutes to spare. If anyone could get those children back alive, it was her. Granted, he said. Take whatever resources you need. Pick your team. But Salmon! Bring them home. All of them. I will, sir, she promised. Across the solar system, the call went out. Every human military installation received the alert. Every ship, every station, every outpost learned what had happened. The reaction was immediate and universal. Humanity was going to war. On Luna Base, General Tyjan ordered his ground forces to prepare for deployment. On Europa Station, Admiral Hygen began coordinating supply lines. On Earth itself, in cities from Seoul to New York to Lagos, people watched the news broadcasts in stunned silence. Then the silence turned to anger. Then the anger turned to action. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Retired soldiers requested to be called back to service. Ship captains offered their vessels for military use. Across human space, people who had lived their entire lives in peace suddenly remembered that their species had once been warriors. They remembered that humans had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain not by being gentle, but by being the most dangerous predators their world had ever known. Lieutenant Junho sat in the cockpit of his stealth reconnaissance ship, the Silent Arrow, and reviewed his mission briefing. He was 28 years old and had been flying recon missions for 6 years. He had mapped asteroid fields and surveyed distant planets. He had tracked pirate ships and monitored trade routes, but he had never done anything like this. His orders were simple. Find the children. Locate exactly where the Verksothi were keeping them. Get that information back to Commander Summon's extraction team. The problem was that the Verksothi had a head start. They could be anywhere in their territory by now. But Junho had one advantage. The stasis pods the aliens used gave off a specific quantum signature. It was faint, but with the right equipment, could be tracked across light years. JUNHO programmed the search. Parameters into his ship's computers and launched from Mars Station. The Silent Arrow lived up to its name. It was small, fast, and nearly invisible to sensors. Within hours, he was approaching Verksothi space, to scanners sweeping for any sign of those stolen children, back on Mars. Admiral Dayon convened an emergency meeting with Earth's military council. The meeting lasted exactly 9 minutes. Every member voted the same way. Unanimous approval for full military action. No restrictions. No rules of engagement that would limit their ability to rescue the children. We're not just sending a rescue mission. Dayon told the council. We're sending a message to every species in the galaxy. You don't touch human children, not ever. Those who do will face consequences they can't imagine. An hour later, representatives from the Galactic Council contacted Earth's command. They were worried. They talked about diplomatic procedures and proper channels and the need for calm discussion. They reminded humanity of the treaties that prevented military action without council approval. Dayon took the call himself. The council representative, an alien named Hannah from a peaceful species called the Telari, appeared on his screen. She had large eyes and soft features, and she looked genuinely concerned. Admiral Dayon, she said gently, we understand your anger. The taking of children is terrible, but you must work through proper channels. The council will investigate. We will demand the children's return. We will. How long will that take? Dayon interrupted. Hannah hesitated. The council must convene. There are procedures. Perhaps 3 or 4 weeks, too. Those children don't have 3 or 4 weeks, Dayon said. His voice was cold. Do you know what the Virexathi do with the beings they take? They experiment on them. They use them for genetic testing. They cause pain and suffering because they're curious about how different species respond to trauma. Every day those children spend with the Virexathi is a day of horror. So no, we won't wait for your procedures. But the treaties. Hannah tried again. Tell the Virexathi to return our children immediately, Dayon said. Tell them they have 24 hours. After that, we're coming to take them back ourselves. And when we're done, there won't be anything left of their military to threaten anyone again. He ended the call before Hannah could respond. Around him, his staff stood a little straighter. They had just heard their admiral declare war on an entire species. They had heard him tell the Galactic Council that humanity didn't care about their rules anymore. It should have been frightening. Instead, it felt right. 3 days passed. Lieutenant Junho's scanners finally picked up the quantum signature he was looking for. The children were in the Virexathi home system, on an orbital station called the Harvest Complex. It was a facility designed for processing captives before shipping them to various buyers across the galaxy. JUNHO transmitted his findings back to Mars and continued his surveillance. He mapped the station's defenses, counted the ships protecting it, and identified possible entry points. The information flowed back to Commander Summon's team, who began planning the extraction. Sergeant Minho and his squad, called the Reapers, studied the data carefully. They were enhanced soldiers, men and women, with neural augmentation and advanced combat training. They had done dozens of hostage rescues, but never anything this deep in enemy territory. Never anything this important. It's heavily defended, Minho noted, looking at the tactical display. 6 guard towers, 3 patrol groups, and sensors covering every approach. Then we go in quiet, Salman said. We don't fight unless we have to. The priority is getting those children out alive. And if we have to fight, asked Dr. Yuna, the team's medic. Summon's expression didn't change. Then we fight until every child is safe, or until we're dead. Those are the only 2 options. The fleet arrived at the edge of Virexathi space exactly 4 days after the children were taken. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They didn't hide. They didn't try to be subtle. They wanted the Virexathi to see them coming. On the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution Admiral Dayon opened a communication channel to the Virexathi homeworld. His message was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every language. This is Admiral Dayon of the United Earth Defense Fleet, he said. You have taken 15 human children. You have 24 hours to return them unharmed. If you comply, we will leave peacefully. If you refuse, we will come and take them, and we will destroy everything that stands between us and our children. You have been warned. The Virexathi response came an hour later. Commander Vexro himself appeared on screen, his alien features twisted in what might have been amusement. Humans, he hissed. You are not warriors. You are diplomats, traitors. You talk and negotiate. You don't fight. Return to your space before you embarrass yourselves. Oh. Dayon smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You're about to learn something about humans that You should have researched better. We prefer peace. We choose diplomacy. But when you threaten our children, we become something else entirely. See you soon, Commander. He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. Prepare for assault. All ships battle stations. Commander Soman, your team is go for extraction. Bring our children home. Throughout the fleet, final preparations began. Weapons charged, shields powered up, Marines loaded into dropships, and on a small stealth vessel approaching the Harvest Complex. Sergeant Minho and his Reaper squad checked their equipment one last time. The children were 3 decks below them, 3 decks and a few hundred armed Vrixathi soldiers. Minho had faced worse odds before, but never with so much at stake. Remember, he told his team, "Those kids have been through hell. We find them, we need to be calm. Gentle. They need to know they're safe." His soldiers nodded. They were killers when they needed to be, but they were also human beings who understood what it meant to protect innocence. The assault was about to begin. Humanity was about to show. The galaxy, what happened when you made the mistake of taking their children? Inside the Harvest Complex, Giwan opened her eyes slowly. Everything hurt. Her head pounded, her arms ached, and there was a strange taste in her mouth from whatever gas they had used to keep her asleep. She tried to sit up and realized she was lying on a hard metal floor in a cell made of transparent walls. Around her, the other children were waking up too. Taiyang was in the cell next to hers, and she could see him blinking in confusion. Across the corridor, little Nari clutched her stuffed rabbit and looked around with wide, frightened eyes. All 15 children were there, each in their own small cell, able to see each other but unable to touch. Giwan forced herself to stand, despite the dizziness. She needed to be strong. The younger children were looking at her, waiting for her to tell them what to do. That was her job now. She was the oldest, and they needed her to be brave even when she was terrified. "Everyone listen to me," she called out, her voice carrying to all the cells. "We need to stay calm. Someone will come for us." Captain Hayen sent a message. "Help is coming." "But when?" a little boy named Minje asked. He was only 5 years old, and tears ran down his face. "Soon," Jiwan said, trying to sound confident. "Till then, we stick together. We take care of each other." Okay, the children nodded. Even Nari, who was crying quietly, managed a small nod. Outside their cells, Vrixathi guards walked past on patrol. They were tall creatures with rough skin and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. They carried weapons and spoke in their clicking, hissing language that the children couldn't understand. Sometimes the guards would stop and stare at the children like they were looking at animals in a zoo. It made Jiwan's skin crawl. Commander Thextrel entered the containment area that afternoon. He walked down the corridor between the cells, examining each child carefully. His scanner device beeped as he recorded their vital signs and genetic information. The children pressed themselves against the far walls of their cells, trying to get away from him. When he reached Jiwan's cell, he stopped. She stared back at him, refusing to look away. She was scared, but she wouldn't let this creature see her fear. "Interesting," Thextrel said, in broken standard language. "This one has spirit. The buyers will appreciate that." Spirit breaks nicely. Juan didn't understand what he meant, but she understood the tone. This alien thought she was weak, thought all of them were weak. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that humans were stronger than he knew. But she stayed quiet. Dr. Minji had taught her that sometimes being strong meant knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Vexeril moved on, and Juan let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Time passed strangely in the cells. There were no windows, no way to tell if it was day or night. The lights stayed the same dim level all the time. The guards changed. Shifts at what seemed like regular intervals, but without a clock, Jiwan couldn't be sure. She started organizing the children to keep them busy. She had them count things, count the floor panels in their cells, count how many times the guards walked past, count their breaths, anything to keep their minds occupied. Taiyang, despite being scared, had started studying the guards. He was good at noticing patterns, always had been. He whispered his observations to Juwan whenever the guards were far enough away. "They change every 6 hours," Taiyang said quietly. "And there's always 3 of them. To walk around, one stays at that desk near the door. Giwan nodded. She didn't know if the information would be useful, but it felt good to be doing something other than just waiting. On the second day, the Vrixathi started their examinations. They came for the children one at a time, taking them to another room. The children who came back wouldn't talk about what happened, but they had marks on their arms where needles had been, and some of them cried for hours afterward. When they came for Nari, the little girl screamed and fought. She was so small, and the guard just picked her up easily, carrying her away while she called for Jiwan. Jiwan slammed her fists against the transparent wall, shouting, but it did nothing. The wall didn't even shake. Nar came back an hour later. She was quiet and pale, hugging her rabbit so tightly that her knuckles were white. Jiwan talked to her through the wall, trying to comfort her, but Nari just stared at nothing. When they came for Giwan herself, she didn't fight. She had decided that fighting wasted energy, and she might need that energy later. The guards led her to a cold room filled with strange equipment. A Vrixathi doctor with 4 arms examined her, taking samples of her blood and skin. The procedures hurt, and Jiwan bit her lip to keep from crying out. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The doctor said something in their language and laughed. Jiwan didn't need a translation to know he was mocking her. When she was back in her cell, she noticed something. The doctor had been careless. There was a small medical instrument, barely bigger than a pen, stuck in the pocket of the clothes she wore. The guards hadn't checked her when they brought her back. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, when the lights dimmed slightly for what she assumed was sleeping time, Giwan whispered to Taiyang, "Don't give up. Someone is coming. I know it." "How do you know?" Taiyang asked. He sounded so tired. "Because we're human," Jiwan said, "and humans don't leave their children behind. Ever." She didn't know if she believed it herself, but she needed Taiyang to believe it. She needed all of them to keep hoping. High above the Harvest Complex, beyond the range of their sensors, Sergeant Minho and his Reaper squad floated in space. They wore black suits that absorbed light and heat, making them nearly invisible. Small maneuvering jets moved them slowly toward the station's maintenance section. Minho had been a soldier for 10 years. He had fought pirates, smugglers, and terrorists. He had seen combat on 6 different worlds. But as he looked at the station, where those children were being held, he felt something different. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something deeper. Cold certainty that he would get those kids out or die trying. 5 minutes to contact. Dr. Yuna's voice came through his helmet radio. She was the squad's medic, floating beside him. "How are you doing, Sergeant?" "Fine," Minho said shortly. Then more honestly angry. "Good," Yuna said. "Use it." The squad reached the station's hull and attached their magnetic grips. Moving carefully, they made their way to a maintenance hatch that Lieutenant Junho's reconnaissance had identified. The hatch was locked, but their tech specialist, a quiet man named Jinwoo, made quick work of it. One by one, they slipped inside the station. The maintenance tunnels were dark and narrow, lit only by occasional emergency lights. The squad moved in complete silence, communicating with hand signals. They had practiced this kind of infiltration hundreds of times, but never with so much at stake. Minho checked his helmet display.
Ow.
The children were 3 decks down, in a section marked as containment. There were approximately 30 guards between the squad and their target. Long odds, but Reaper squad had beaten worse. They moved through the tunnels like ghosts. When they encountered a maintenance worker, Jinwoo's tranquilizer dart put him to sleep before he could raise an alarm. They avoided the main corridors, sticking to the service passages that ran throughout the station. An hour into the infiltration, they reached a junction point that overlooked the containment area. Through a ventilation grate, Minho could see into the corridor where the children were being held. He counted 15 transparent cells, each containing a child. His thermal sensors showed guards at both ends of the corridor and one at a control desk. Then he saw the children themselves, and something cold settled into his chest. They were so small, wearing thin clothes that didn't fit properly, where some were huddled in corners. Others sat and stared at nothing. One little girl was clutching a stuffed animal. Minho had seen a lot of terrible things in his career, but this might be the worst. These weren't soldiers or criminals. They were children who should have been safe on their colony ship, heading toward a new life. Instead, they were prisoners of aliens who saw them as products to be sold. "I see them," he whispered into his radio. 15 confirmed. "They look scared but mobile. Dr. Yuna, you'll need to be ready for psychological trauma." Ad put down, 2 more appeared. The extraction ship that was supposed to pick them up couldn't dock while the station was under attack. They were trapped with 15 terrified children and running low on ammunition. G1 could see the stress on Sergeant Minho's face. He was trying to hide it, but she had become good at reading people during her time in the cells. They were in trouble. The soldiers were running out of options. Then Commander Thexrel appeared at the far end of the corridor. The Vrixathi commander who had taken them in the first place. He carried a large weapon and had a squad of elite guards with him. His translator device crackled to life. "Humans," he said, his voice full of hatred. "You will not leave with those specimens. If I cannot have them, neither can you." He raised his weapon, aiming not at the soldiers, but at the children. Minho moved faster than G1 thought possible. He threw himself in front of the children just as Thexrel fired. The energy bolt hit Minho's chest armor and burned through. The sergeant fell to one knee, but didn't go down completely. He raised his rifle with shaking hands and fired back. The shot caught Thexrel in the shoulder, spinning him around. The alien commander snarled and prepared to fire again. But before he could, the entire wall beside him exploded inward. Commander Salman stepped through the breach with her assault team. She had finally reached the station and fought her way directly through the hull to get to the children's position. Her team opened fire immediately, cutting down the X-Rel and his guards in seconds. "Extraction team, move out," Salman ordered. "Get those children to the ships now." Dr. Yuna and 2 of summoned soldiers began rushing the children toward the breach. Ji-Wan helped carry little Nari, while Taiyang stayed close to her side. They climbed through the torn metal into a different corridor where more human soldiers waited to escort them. Behind them, Minho tried to stand, but couldn't. Dr. Yuna ran back and knelt beside him, checking his wound. "You're going to be fine," she told him. "The armor stopped most of it." "The children?" Minho asked. "Safe. You kept them safe." Minho nodded and let his head fall back. He had done his job. The children were going home. The evacuation continued rapidly. Human soldiers poured into the station now, overwhelming the Vrixathi defenders. The aliens had nowhere to retreat. The station was surrounded by human warships, and every escape route was blocked. Commander Thexrel, bleeding from his shoulder wound, crawled to his command console and tried to access the station's self-destruct. If he was going to die, he would take the humans with him. But when he entered the code, nothing happened. Someone had already disabled it. A human soldier appeared above him. The soldier said something in Korean, then switched to standard language. "It's over. You lost." Dexrel looked up at the human's face. He saw no cruelty there, no satisfaction, just cold determination. These humans weren't fighting because they enjoyed it. They were fighting because he had made the mistake of taking their children. "We didn't know," Dexrel said weakly. "We studied you. You seemed peaceful, diplomatic." The soldier nodded. "We are, until you threaten our children. Then we become something else." Outside the station, the space battle was ending. The Vrixathi fleet was in full retreat, those ships that could still move limping away. The station itself was listing, its defensive weapons destroyed, its shields down. Human marines were boarding it from multiple points. Securing every section, Admiral Dayun watched from his bridge as reports came in. Minimal human casualties. The children were secured and being evacuated. The mission was a success. But he felt no satisfaction. Only the cold certainty that this had been necessary. "Sir," his communications officer said, "the Vrixathi homeworld is broadcasting a general surrender. They're asking for terms. Tell them we'll discuss terms after our children are safely home," Dayun replied. "Until then, we hold position and maintain readiness." On the medical frigate that Captain Hune had brought to the battle, the children were finally safe. Doctors and nurses checked them over, treating their injuries and giving them warm blankets and food. Dr. Mingy from the Harmony's Rest was there too, her head bandaged from the initial attack. When she saw the children alive, she broke down crying. Gi-wan sat on a medical bed, holding Taeyang's hand on one side and Neris on the other. The three of them were together again, safe, going home. A nurse brought them hot chocolate. Real earth chocolate made from actual cocoa. Guan took a sip and felt warmth spread through her body. It was the first time she had felt warm in days. "Is Sergeant Minho okay?" she asked the nurse. "He'll be fine," the nurse assured her. "He's tough, and he did his job. He protected you." Guan nodded. She would remember that. Remember how those soldiers had put themselves between the children and danger without hesitation? Remember that when humans said they would come for you, they meant it. Through the medical frigate's viewport, she could see the ruins of the Vrixathi station floating in space. Human warships surrounded it, their running lights bright against the darkness. It should have been frightening, all that military power. Instead, Gi-wan felt safe for the first time since the attack. The Vrixathi had learned something today, something that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. You could fight humans over territory. You could compete with them in trade. You could even challenge them diplomatically, but you never, ever took their children. Because when you did, they would come for you with everything they had. And they wouldn't stop until their children were home. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue. The 15 children sat together in a bright classroom on New Terra, the colony world that had been their destination all along. The room had large windows that showed blue skies and green fields. It looked almost like Earth, which was exactly what the colonists had wanted when they chose this world. G1 watched the clouds drift past while her teacher, a kind woman named Su-jin, talked about mathematics. The lesson was simple, probably too simple for someone her age, but Juwan didn't mind. Simple was good right now. Simple was safe. Beside her, Taeyang was actually paying attention, his notebook filled with calculations. He had always loved numbers. The Vrixathi hadn't taken that away from him, at least. On Jiwan's other side, Nari colored a picture of her stuffed rabbit. Hops the rabbit sat on her desk now. Watching over her like a small guardian, all 15 children were here in the same classroom, learning together. Dr. Mingy had suggested keeping them together for now. They felt safer that way. They understood each other in ways that others couldn't. They had shared something terrible, and that shared experience bonded them. The nightmares still came. Gi-wan woke up screaming at least 3 times a week, certain she was back in the transparent cell with aliens walking past. Dr. Yuna, the medic from Reaper Squad, had stayed on New Terra to help with their recovery. She talked to each child regularly, helping them process what had happened. "It's okay to be angry," Dr. Yuna had told Juwan during one session. "It's okay to be scared. What happened to you wasn't fair. But you survived. You're strong. I don't feel strong," Guan had admitted. "Strength isn't about not being afraid," Dr. Yuna replied. "It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You've kept those children together. You gave them hope. That's real strength." After class ended, the children walked to the cafeteria for lunch. The new Terra colony was still small, just a few hundred people, but it was growing. More ships arrived every week bringing supplies and new colonists. The attack on the Harmony's Rest could have ended this colony before it began. But humanity had decided to push forward instead. If anything, more people wanted to come now. The rescue mission had reminded everyone what it meant to be human. In the cafeteria, Yuan saw Captain Heian sitting with some of the other adults. His ship, the Harmony's Rest, had been repaired and was now in orbit above New Terra, serving as a temporary space station. When he saw the children, he smiled and waved. Gi-wan waved back. Later that afternoon, a transport shuttle landed at the colony's main pad. The children had been told that visitors were coming, but they didn't know who. When they saw Sergeant Minho step off the shuttle, several of them started crying. Minho looked different out of his armor. He wore simple civilian clothes and walked with a slight limp from his injury, but his face was the same. Kind eyes and a hard face. The face of someone who had put himself between them and death. The children rushed toward him, and Minho knelt down, letting them crowd around him. Nari hugged him tightly, and he patted her head gently. Taiyang shook his hand with exaggerated formality, trying to be grown up. Jiwan just stood there for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged him too. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Minho said. "I was just doing my job." "Your job almost got you killed," Jiwan pointed out. Minho smiled. "That's part of the job too, but I'd do it again." "All of it. You kids are worth it." Behind him, other members of Reaper Squad emerged from the shuttle. Ginwoo, Dr. Yuna, and 3 others who had fought in the station. They had all come to visit the children they had saved. The colony's administrators had prepared a celebration, but the soldiers asked for something smaller. They just wanted to spend time with the kids, make sure they were okay. That evening, the colony held a quiet dinner in the main hall. The children sat with their rescuers, asking questions about the battle and the ships and what being a soldier was like. The soldiers answered patiently, though they left out the violent parts. There was time enough for those stories when the children were older, far across the galaxy. On Mars Station, Admiral Dayon sat in his office reading reports. The aftermath of the rescue mission had been complicated. The Galactic Council had formally censured humanity for its military action. They said the response had been excessive, disproportionate, dangerous. Dayoon had attended the council hearing himself. He had stood before representatives of 100 different species and listened to them condemn humanity's actions. Then he had given his response. "We will always protect our children," he had said simply, "with total force, if necessary. You call it excessive. We call it love. If you threaten human children again, you will get the same response." This is not a negotiation. This is a fact. The hearing had ended in chaos. Some species agreed with humanity. Others were terrified of what they had seen. But everyone understood the message. Humans were peaceful until you crossed the one line they had drawn in the stars. Interestingly, 17 other species had privately thanked Earth's government. When human forces had dismantled the Vrixithy operation, they had found children and young beings from other species too. All of them had been returned home. The Vrixithy slave trade network, which had operated for over 2 centuries, was broken completely. Now Dayon was reading about the treaty negotiations. The Vrixithy survivors, less than a third of their original population, had requested peace terms. They were terrified that humanity would come back to finish what they had started. Dayoon had surprised everyone with his response. Humanity didn't want Vrixithy territory or resources. They wanted one thing, a guarantee that no species under Vrixithy influence would ever traffic in children again. Not human children. Not anyone's children. The Vrixithy had agreed immediately. More than that, they had asked for human help in establishing enforcement. They wanted human observers stationed in their space to make sure the agreement was followed. They had learned their lesson thoroughly. The agreement became known as the Soul Accord. It's named after the district where the rescued children had originally lived. It established the strongest protections for young beings that the galaxy had ever seen, and it was enforced by human military might. Commander Salman knocked on Dayon's door and entered. She looked tired but satisfied. "The last of the salvage teams just reported in," she said. "We've recovered everything we can from the Harvest Complex. The Vrixithy have agreed to dismantle the station completely." "Good," Dayon said. "What about the other facilities?" "All shut down. We found 12 more stations like the Harvest Complex. All of them are being destroyed. The Vrixithy are cooperating fully." Dayon nodded. He looked at the report in his hand, which showed pictures of the 15 children on New Terra. They were smiling in the photos, playing, learning, being. Children again, it was worth it, he said quietly. Salman followed his gaze. "Yes, sir, it was." On New Terra, as evening fell, the children gathered around a fire pit in the colony's central square. The adults had built it for them, a place where they could sit together and feel safe. Sergeant Minho and his squad sat with them, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. Giwan looked around at her friends. At Taiyang, who was laughing at one of Jinwoo's jokes. At Nari, who was showing Dr. Yuna how Hops could sit up by himself. At all the other children who had survived the horror. Together, they had scars now. Nightmares, fears that would take years to fade. But they also had something else. They had learned what it meant to be human, to be part of a species that didn't abandon its young, that would cross the galaxy and fight impossible battles to bring them home. Sergeant Minho Juan asked, "Why did you come for us?" "I mean, I know it was your job, but you could have died." Minho thought about his answer carefully. "Do you know what the hardest part of being a soldier is?" he asked. G1 shook her head. "It's knowing that there are people out there who need help, and you might not reach them in time. When we got the call that you had been taken, every soldier in the fleet felt the same way. We had to bring you home. Not because someone ordered us to, but because you're ours. You're human children, and that means you're everyone's responsibility. Does that make sense?" Guan nodded slowly. It did make sense. She had felt the same way about the younger children in the cells. She had been responsible for them, not because anyone told her to be, but because it was the right thing to do. "I grow up," she said. "I want to be like you. I want to protect people." Minho smiled. "Then you'll make a fine soldier. Or a doctor. Or a teacher. Or anything else you want to be. Because protection comes in many forms." That night, after the soldiers had left and the children were in their beds, Quan lay awake looking at the ceiling. She could hear Taiyang breathing in the bed next to hers. They shared a room now, even though the colony had separate quarters. Neither of them wanted to be alone at night, Jiwan. Taiyang whispered, "Are you awake?" "Yeah. Do you think we're safe now?" "Really safe?" Guan thought about it. She thought about Captain Hyun sending the message, about Admiral Dae-Yun mobilizing the fleet, about Sergeant Minho stepping between her and danger, about the entire human military crossing the galaxy because 15 children needed help. "Yes," she said finally, "we're safe. Because we're human. And humans protect their children. Always." Taiyang was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good. I'm glad I'm human." "Me too," Jiwan said. In the years that followed, the story of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy. It became a legend, told by many species to their young. A cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating humanity. A reminder that some species valued their children above all else. The 15 children grew up strong and determined. Guan did become a soldier, joining the Space Navy and eventually commanding her own ship. Taiyang became an engineer designing safer colony vessels. Nari became a teacher who specialized in helping traumatized children. They all carried the memory of what had happened to them, but they also carried the memory of being rescued, of seeing humanity's true nature revealed when they needed it most. The Vrixathi species recovered slowly, but they never forgot the lesson they had learned. They spread the word to other species, trade with humans, negotiate with humans, even compete with humans, but never, ever threaten their children, because humans were capable of great peace and great violence. They preferred peace. They chose diplomacy. They wanted cooperation. But when you took their children, when you crossed that one absolute line, they became something terrifying and unstoppable. The galaxy had learned. You don't take human children. That was their last mistake. Not because humans were cruel or warlike by nature, but because they loved fiercely. Because they protected absolutely. Because they had decided long ago, written into their cultural DNA, across every society and every time period, that children were worth any sacrifice on New Terra. The monument that had been erected in the central plaza bore the names of all 15 children, not as victims, but as survivors. And beneath their names, the inscription that became famous across the stars, they took human children. That was their last mistake. Not because we seek war, but because we defend peace. Not because we are cruel, but because we love without limit. Touch our children, and learn why we are the species that refuse to stop reaching for the stars. The children visited the monument sometimes, reading their own names carved in stone. They had survived. They had come home. And the entire human race had proven that no distance was too far, no enemy too strong, no price too high when it came to bringing their children home. That was what it meant to be human. That was the promise humanity made to every child born under its protection. We will come for you. We will not leave you behind. We will bring you home, always.